Before we move on with our project, let's talk about some more rules. Hold Ctrl and press space and select an area to zoom. As I said before, I'll use this one particular zoom method, Ctrl and space, and drawing a selection box. Press space and position our document. Now, go to the menu, window, and activate the swatches palette by clicking on its name. We'll also need a second palette. Go to window menu and click on colours. We'll now talk about these two palettes, colours and swatches. What makes these two palettes different? Well, swatches palette contains colours and patterns, while colour palette has only colours. Let's go to Colour Palettes menu and click on Show Options. Again, go to the palette menu and click on Show Options. We have two palettes, Swatches, Palette and Colour Palette. Select the rectangle tool. But we want to draw a square and not a rectangle. To draw a square, hold the Shift key while drawing. Now we know that to draw proportional figures in Illustrator, we need to hold Shift. Switch to Selection tool. To scale our figure without losing its proportions, hold Shift and drag one of these anchor points. So we can use Shift for two actions, to scale and create proportional figures. Our figure is now green, because that's the fill colour. The fill colour is this square right here. Under the fill colour there's another icon. It's the stroke colour. To switch between the two, just click on it. We can also change this colour in the colour palette right here. So, now we're changing the main colour of our figure, but when we bring this icon to the top, we'll change the colour of the figure's border. To make the border more visible, we can change the stroke width by modifying its value up here. As you can see, there's also some red here. It's the colour of the bounding box. The bounding box colour can be changed by choosing a different colour of the layer. Let's activate the Layers palette and change the layers, and at the same time the bounding box colour. Let's change the colour to light blue and click OK. We can now close the Layers palette. So when the frame is in the first icon here or here, it means that we're changing the colour of the figure's border. And if this square is on top, we can change the main colour of the figure. We just need to pay attention to the position of these two icons. Let's see what we have up here. Here we have two icons. This one allows us to modify the colour and the pattern of the border. The other one, we set the same options but for the main colour. This icon is for the fill and this is for the border. So these two icons are nothing else than swatches palette. So this and this are almost the same thing. The difference is that the two icons on property bar are divided between fill and border. Thanks to these icons, we don't have to switch between the fill colour and the stroke colour. We just select our figure and change the colours instantly by using these icons. We can use the swatches palette to change the fill of our figure. Let's choose a few different fills. Now, we can change the colour of the border by clicking this icon here. Here, we chose the colour of the border, and here we chose the colour of the object. We can also set a pattern instead of a colour. If we want to do the same thing using the swatches palette, we need to switch between the fill colour and the stroke colour. Now we know how to set the colour not only to the figure but also its border. As you can see, the colour palette contains only colours. The swatches palette, on the other hand, has also patterns. Every palette, well, most of the palettes, have libraries. Let's move this palette. Now, click on the icon placed in the bottom right-hand corner of the swatches palette. This menu contains all the positions from the swatches libraries. In other words, from this menu, we can choose different types of colours and patterns. For example, we can choose various gradients, skin tones, and simply colours. Let's go back to the list of swatches library and activate the corporate library. Remember that this is not a standard palette, it's a library palette. Here we have the swatches palette, and here we have the swatches palette library. By clicking on these arrows here, we can browse the swatches library. If we want to save one of these folders, we just need to drag it into our main swatches palette. Apart from that, we choose only one colour we like and drag it to the swatches palette. We can also choose a different library, for example, gradients. Let's drag one gradient to our swatches palette and fill our figure with it. That's how we use libraries. This library also contains patterns. We need to learn how to distinguish the library palette from the regular palette. We can do that by looking on this part right here. If the palette has these arrows for browsing, it's a library palette. Let's see what we have in this library. Let's select some patterns now. Maybe this one. As you can see, there are many patterns in Swatches library. When we use a pattern or a colour directly from the library, this pattern will automatically be added to the main Swatches palette. As you can see, the pattern we've just used is now on the Swatches palette. Close the library palette. We'll now make our own pattern, but before that, one more word about borders. To delete this border, we need to switch to stroke and click this little icon here. As you can see, the border disappeared. We can do the same thing with the fill colour. We can't see our figure now, but it's still there. Go to View menu and click on Outline. Now we can precisely locate our figure. Let's switch back to normal view. To do that, go to View and click Preview. You can also do that by pressing Ctrl and Y on your keyboard. Let's now fill our figure with gradient. Well, maybe let's fill it with even colour. Now we'll create our own pattern. Select the pen tool and make a figure by clicking in various points of the document. As you can see, Illustrator automatically cuts the fill of our figure. When we switch to Outline view, we can see that there's no path here. So no matter where we put our next line, Illustrator will modify the fill area and extend it. To make this figure whole, we need to close it ourselves. What Illustrator does is just showing the preview of our figure. Let's fill our figure with this colour. For now, we won't use patterns, just normal colours. Maybe downscale our figure a little. Make this bigger. Now move this one. Now hold the Alt key and duplicate the green figure a couple of times. Copy it again until it will look good. Once we're happy with the look of our pattern, we have to select all figures and hold Shift and downscale the pattern. As you can see here, our pattern doesn't have a border. Now, we'll group it. Or maybe we'll make it a little bigger. Go to Object menu and click Group. Now click on our pattern, hold the mouse button and move it. Let's make the Swatches palette bigger. To add a selection to the swatches palette, click on it, hold the mouse button and drag it onto the palette. Let's now create a new rectangle. Fill this rectangle with the pattern we've just created. Now we'll learn how to save our pattern. Go to Swatch Palette. At the very bottom there's an option called Save Swatch Library as AI. We won't save our palette now. Maybe we'll do it later. I just wanted to show you how you can do it. Another swatches feature, they can also serve as styles. How can we add swatches to styles and use them? We'll talk about it in a while, but first, select one of the even colours on the swatches palette. If we now click on the new swatch icon, the properties of the selected colour will be transported into this window. When we select the pattern and click on New Swatch icon, a completely different window will appear. When we select the pattern, the colour palette also changes. As you can see, scroll bars are not active. Select the colour and the scroll bars will be active again. That's all fine, but now we're interested in only even colours. We can choose from the two colour types, process colour and spot colour. If we create our document for printing, we use process colour, which is the separation colour. Spot colour is an extra option and we'll talk about that later. For now, we'll only use process colour, which is the best option for printing. Spot colour can also be used in printing, but it's an extra colour. Underneath, we have the options called Global. Colour mode is set to CMYK, which means that there are 4 colours and each of them is represented by a number from 0 to 100. CMYK is also the best colour mode for printing. If we play with these scroll bars, we can modify the current colour. We won't use the global option for now, so let's just click OK. As you can see, the new swatches was added to the swatch palette. Now we can change its name or simply start using it. Let's draw a rectangle. Rectangle 1, Rectangle 2 and Rectangle 3, Rectangle 4. These rectangles have colour of our swatch. Let's now see what will happen if we play with the global option. Click twice on our swatch and go to Editing Options. First, let's change the colour of our swatch and click OK. Although our swatch is different now, the rectangle's colour remained the same. Click on our swatch twice and go to the swatch options again. Let's now activate the global option. We're doing it now, but it can also be activated when we create a new swatch. Select all the rectangles and click on the swatch to change their colour. We wouldn't have to do this if global option was active when we created our swatch. Now we have a completely different situation. All of these rectangles use the same swatch colour. Let's now click twice on our swatch and change its colour. Although the rectangles aren't selected, their colour will change once we click OK. It's all because of the global option. We can call this technique colour styles. It's a really useful option if we create a project and we don't know if we wouldn't want to change its colours separately later on. It's a frequently used option in design, but we can do the same thing here. Just select the objects, click on the swatch, and we don't have to worry about the colour because we can change it once or for all of our figures. So that's how the swatch palette works. As we'll now move to other options, we no longer need the swatch palette and we can move to the side. Let's draw a rectangle. Now, switch to outline view. The pen with a little plus allows us to add more anchor points to our figure. Just click once and a new anchor point will be added. The pen tool with a little minus will delete an anchor point when we click on it. Let's switch to this white cursor called Direct Selection Tool. This tool has two functions. Its first function is moving the anchor points. To do that, we click on the anchor point, drag it and release the mouse button. We can select it also by drawing a selection box over it. When anchor point is filled with colour, it means that it's selected. When it's empty inside, it's not selected. Now, we can select 3 anchor points and move them all at once. Let's switch back to preview mode. Now, select the Direct Selection tool and click on our figure. As you can see, all the anchor points were selected automatically, and because of the fill, we can easily move our figure. We don't have to use the selection tool to do that. Let's apply no fill option to our figure. Let's set a stroke to our figure. Bring the stroke icon to top and change its colour. If our figure doesn't have a colour, we can move it with the Direct Selection tool. We can only move it by dragging it by its border, but when we do that, we can easily modify our shape instead of moving it. So again, if our figure has a colour, we can easily move it just by dragging it. But how can we move only anchor points? Let's try it by just clicking once on it and dragging it. As you can see, this didn't work. To move an anchor point, click on it twice. The anchor point will now be selected and we're able to move it. We can also do that by selecting the anchor point with the selection box and then drag it. It may seem easy now, but I'm sure that we'll make more than one mistake because of that. Another tool here is the Convert Anchor Point tool. Although we won't be using it that much, let's talk briefly about it. We can find the very same tool in Photoshop and in Design. Just click on the anchor point and hold the mouse button and move your mouse. As you can see, we converted our corner point to a smooth point and direction lines appeared. To undo this process, just click on the anchor point again. As you can see, a figure again has a pointy corner. So again, click on the anchor point, hold the mouse button and move your mouse. To further modify our figure, we'd have to switch to Direct Selection tool. Well, this tool has another feature. If we drag this direction line right here, we'll convert the smooth corner into a corner point with independent direction lines. Switch to Direct Selection tool. It's the white cursor icon, not the black one. Click on the anchor point and the direction lines will appear. By dragging these direction lines, we can modify this corner of our figure. To convert our smooth point back into a corner point, just switch to Convert Anchor tool and click once on the anchor you wish to convert. The direction lines disappeared and the corner now looks just as before. We can convert all anchor points into smooth points. We just move them as we wish, but we'll do it slightly different. Select the Direct Selection tool and select one anchor point. Of course, we can select more, but for now it's enough. Just click on this icon on the property bar and it will convert your corner point to a smooth point. We can now select 2 anchor points and do the same thing. As you can see, both points were converted to smooth points. To convert them back, select all smooth points and click on the icon just before the smooth points icon. As you can see, all selected smooth points are now converted to standard anchor points. Again, select the anchor points and click to convert them. When we want to modify a smooth point, we just drag one off its direction lines. Now we'll talk about how we can modify our smooth points without using the Convert Anchor Points tool. First step is to press and hold Alt. We can't press Alt later, we need to do that before we proceed with other actions. So, hold Alt, grab the direction line handle and drag it. Now we can release Alt. Please maintain the correct sequence of actions. If we first click on the point and then hold Alt, we'll copy the selected path instead of modifying it. As you can see, the anchor point and the path it's placed on is copied and now exists on a separate figure, so we need to remember to first hold Alt. Again, select the anchor point, hold Alt and drag the direction lines. This way, we can modify our smooth corners into corners with independent direction lines.